Jesus' day did not turn out like he had expected. Having heard that Herod had executed John the Baptist, Jesus withdrew from the crowds and went across the lake. Maybe he wanted to lay low. After all, Herod also told people that he was afraid that Jesus was John the Baptist back from the dead. Maybe Jesus just needed to think. But when he arrived at that deserted place, a huge crowd had already beat him there. I do not react well to being caught off guard. And I do not react well to having my plans abruptly changed. Like when I thought I would have a day to myself and it turns out to be anything but. But Matthew tells us nothing about what Jesus thought or felt about the change in plans for his day, only that Jesus had compassion and started healing people. And he did that all day. At the end of the reading, Matthew says there were 5,000 men, not counting the women and children. Do the math. Maybe something like 15 or 20,000 people total. Can you imagine pulling up in a rowboat to that scene? And a lot of the people were sick, probably some of them being carried or using crutches, kids running around everywhere. As far as the eye could see, people in need. And all day into the evening, Jesus is responding to these people. So you know how it goes. As evening sets in, the disciples point out, we're in a deserted place. People need time before dark to travel back to their villages to eat. No place to get food around here. It's time to shut down the clinic and get people on their way. Literally, send these crowds away, they tell Jesus, so they can go back to their villages and buy food. Pretty logical. But Jesus says they don't need to go away. You give them something to eat. Impossible. 5 loaves and 2 fishes, you may have heard the loaves were little buns, really. 5 loaves and 2 fishes, widely understood to be a typical peasant's lunch for one person. One drive-through meal from McDonald's or Wendy's for 5,000 men, not counting women and children. It's ridiculous. It's outlandish. Even though the lectionary has separated these 2 back-to-back stories in Matthew chapter 14, surely Matthew means for us to notice the contrast. Herod's birthday banquet a few verses before, contrasted with tens of thousands of hungry people. Herod's birthday bash, surely populated with powerful and influential people surrounding the king to flatter him and curry favor. Rich food brought in on fancy platters, culminating in the platter with the head of the one by whom Herod was so threatened, John the Baptist. And far from the palace in a deserted place, one person's lunch as the only food for thousands of people. Surely we're meant to see the immense contrast then and now between Herod's ways and God's ways. You give them something to eat, Jesus says. Impossible, they say. Impossible, we say. We live in Herod's world. And then, as Jesus shows them what to do, it's hard to miss how much it sounds like our communion liturgy, the one we say here at this table. Jesus took the food, he looked up to heaven, he blessed and broke the bread, and he gave it to the disciples to give to the people. At our table, we say the same thing. He took the bread and blessed and broke it and gave it to them. Matthew means for us to make the connection. The connection between this table and feeding the hungry. This sacrament, which we share once a month in this place, is meant to connect us not just to the Last Supper, but to all that need and to a God who is about abundance from this amazing story. Like most churches, when we share this sacrament, we each have just a little morsel of bread. It's like the mustard seed. A morsel of bread is all it takes to connect us to Jesus. Taste and see that the Lord is good. And yet, perhaps too often we lose the connection we're meant to make between this sacramental morsel and the abundance of our God. The abundance from this story where thousands and thousands of people ate their fill, and there were even 12 baskets of leftovers. Don't you love that detail? That's the detail from a God of abundance. Not just that there's enough, more than enough. Sometimes I think we're meant to imagine our sacrament more like our potlucks and our Easter brunch. That's the kind of abundance we're calling to mind. As we taste and see at this table, we're surely meant to imagine our own deepest hungers being satisfied, but also imagine a world, our world, this community, where people don't go hungry, where people don't have to choose between staying behind to be healed or leaving to buy food, where reverence for God, faith in God, gratitude to God flow outward in compassion for other people and mean that we have more to give and more to share than we usually think, and even more than is needed. Wild, really. What if coming to this table rekindled our imaginations to that possibility? In 2008, a woman named Sarah Miles published a book about her conversion to Christianity. It's called Take This Bread, a spiritual memoir of a 21st century Christian. Sarah Miles was literally raised an atheist, not in church ever at all. She lived a completely secular life as a restaurant cook and a writer. And then one day she wandered into a church. To me, that's maybe the most unbelievable part of the story. But she wandered into a church. In fact, she says, I was certainly not interested in becoming a Christian, or as I thought of it rather less politely, a religious nut. But she went into a church. And in that church that day, she ate a piece of bread and she took a sip of wine just like we do. But for her, something happened. She was converted. Totally converted. At a table like this one we're so familiar with and so used to that we may take it for granted, maybe it's because it was so foreign to her. Maybe it's because she'd not had that bite and that sip in the same way hundreds and hundreds of times over a lifetime like we have. Who knows? Maybe it's because it was so new and different that she was able to experience the mystery and the power behind what we say and do here. Maybe she felt that awe. Jesus looked to heaven. He blessed the bread and broke it and gave it to them, to all of them, hungry as they were, numerous as they were, and thousands of people were fed and satisfied, and there were 12 baskets of leftovers. The story of Sarah Miles takes off from whatever happened that day as she becomes what she used to refer to as a religious nut. But being a religious nut for her was not about piety or angels or good behavior. It wasn't about carrying a Bible around or wearing a cross around her neck. It was about food. It was all about food. What she'd experienced at that table, it was about real food for real people, real hungry people. Something about her conversion, she made a direct connection between the bread she ate at the communion table and groceries. Lots of groceries. The way we put food on this table, she gathered and piled up food to be given away, like what we bring to the grocery cart in the narthex. But the food pantry she established in her church is in the sanctuary, literally giving away the food from the communion table. You can't miss the connection she made, the power of this table. Surely that's what Jesus meant when he said, you give them something to eat. And for Sarah Miles, the people in her community who needed food came, like they do, to food pantries, but they came into that sacred space to be fed. It's such a powerful witness to what we believe and to what we do here. We come into this place bringing who we are and what we have. It never feels like enough. But when we come to this table, we bring ourselves and what we have to be blessed and broken and shared. And as we taste and see that the Lord is good, our imaginations are rekindled to what is possible. We may have lost that connection, but Sarah Miles got it loud and clear. So she set up the food pantry in the sanctuary. And that's not all. That first food pantry helped hundreds of people, the poor, the elderly, the sick, the mentally ill, people marginalized and left behind. It provided them food, but as they were welcomed into the heart of the church, they got a sense of belonging. They became part of the church community, and they hung around to help. And within a few years, the loaves had multiplied, so to speak, and Sarah and her new friends had started dozens more food pantries. I love that story, not because we're going to start putting canned goods on the communion table, but sometimes we need to hear a story like that to remind us of these deep and literal connections that we're meant to make between what we do in here and how we live out there. It's so ironic to me that all this happened when Jesus went to a deserted place to get away. That's what a deserted place is for, to get away from the troubles of the world, to get away from things that make us uncomfortable. And sometimes we think of church as that kind of deserted place, separated from the world and daily life, peace and quiet, lovely music, an inspiring message, and a reassuring taste of bread as we meditate on Jesus. And sometimes communion is like that. But more often, perhaps, we meet Jesus in the days that don't turn out like we thought, in the demands that press in and the needs that never go away. And today is an extra special communion day because we also get to celebrate a baptism. Just as this table ties us to daily bread and regular food, the font ties us to water, that essential element of all of life. And just as we don't eat our fill at this table, we're not going to pour gallons of flowing water on little Emmett, just a sprinkling. But we let that morsel of bread break open our imagination to God's abundance meant to feed the world. And we let that dribble of water remind us of all the places we see and hear and feel water, to remember that God is there, that God's love flows like a giant waterfall, that God's forgiveness satisfies like a glass of water on a hot day, that God's abundance is overflowing as food for thousands of hungry people with baskets of leftovers, and that God's love is as constant and necessary and satisfying as water itself. So come to the waters, come to the table, and bring your imagination, because God is always up to a whole lot more than we think. Amen.